Hello. Welcome to the
Hello.
Gold Bar, everybody. How are you, Renee?
Good.
Good.
I guess that
So,
didn't sound very convincing, did it? I am good now.
yeah. So let's preface this by saying this is pre-recorded. So, if you guys are anticipating being able to ask a question during the show, apologies, but, that's what we're doing. So let's start off with what we're drinking. What do you have that you're swigging down tonight?
So have you heard of the phenomenon of the dirty soda, which is really popular in Utah?
No.
So, if you're Mormon, you're not allowed to have anything fun, but you are allowed to have soda. So they have all these soda shops everywhere, like on every corner, like it's bigger than Starbucks. And you add things to your soda. So like your standard dirty soda would be like, I got a Coke and I put like coffee creamer in it, which is terrible. And you shouldn't do that. But I decided that I was going to do a real dirty soda. So I have I was going to do a dirty Dr. Pepper, but the only Dr. Pepper I had was actually Liquid Death. So I thought that would be like weird. So I have the strawberry lemon poppy soda.
Okay.
And Tito's vodka.
Cheers. So I'm curious how this tastes.
Oh, it's great. It's better with the vodka in it than it is by itself because the flavor is pretty mild. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just your basic like rail cocktail, right? Well, I mean,
yeah.
Good vodka though.
Yeah. So I'm glad that went well. Like I've never had poppies. So like I said, it looks a lot like what's the LaCroix? It looks a lot like when you pour LaCroix.
It's okay. Like they got in trouble because they were making like weird health claims, but it's just soda. So this is just like a strawberry soda with lemonade flavor.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm glad it went well with the vodka. Vodka is kind of like you mix it with most anything.
If it's decent vodka, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. So I went with an old fashioned, and the reason is the parenting skills of the people we're talking about is very old fashioned. There's some extra bitters in there for reasons that will become apparent. So cheers to you.
Cheers. Are you going to name that thing?
Go ahead. Sorry.
I would say you got to use blood orange bitters and then extra bitters next time, and it could be your bitter ruby.
Bitter ruby. I didn't know that. Also, I cheated. I actually like my old fashions, but instead of using sugar, I like using maple syrup. So it's like a maple old fashioned.
Oh yeah, those are good.
Yeah, and honestly, it's easier because the sugar I have is like the sugar in a raw, like that's the sugar we use in this house. That's why I use coffee. So that's really difficult to mix in a cold drink. So the maple syrup just mixes easier. I also have cherries on top because why not? Why not have a little treat? So sorry, before we start, sorry about that. Why don't we do a little news? Here we go.
Here we go. So this isn't exactly news. It's just newly on the internet, I guess, but I found it interesting. Charles Manson has 3 known sons, 2 named Charles Manson, who changed their name, and 1 named Valentin Manson, who also changed his name. Can't imagine why. So the first is Charles Manson Jr., who was born in 1956. He changed his name to Jay White. He had a son of his own that he didn't know, which feels like there's this very weird intergenerational thing happening. And he killed himself at age 40. Yeah. Basically, his son says he just couldn't ever cope with being Charles Manson's son. And then his son, Jason Freeman, who I guess got a good ruling from the judge that he was the next of kin to Charles Manson. So he was awarded custody of Charles Manson's body when he died in 2017. So yeah, he said Freeman, a former kickboxer and cage fighter, told CNN in 2012 that he never knew his father growing up, but sympathized with what he may have been going through. He just couldn't let it go. He couldn't live down who his father was. That's what he said about his dad's suicide. He said he spoke to his grandfather, Charles Manson, a few times on the phone, or occasionally on the phone, sorry. And Manson even told him once or twice that he loved him. So that's weird, but true.
That is weird.
Then there's Charles Luther Manson, not Charles Manson Jr. And he was born in 1959. Oh, sorry, she got pregnant in 1959, so he was born in 1960. That's a really weird way to phrase that. That's not a picture of him. That's Charles Manson.
As an old man with a swastika on his forehead. So
yeah, so he also never knew Charles Manson. And I think he and Charles Manson Jr. were both like preteens when the murders happened, is what I remember reading. Anyway, most that was said about this is that Charles Manson wrote a letter to a pen pal in 2002 that Leona Manson, aka Candy Stevens, had a son, Charles Manson Jr., in Denver, Colorado. I wondered about him. Excuse my dog, sorry.
Hello, Lola.
She might be guesting a little bit. We don't have any other humans in the house right now, so yay.
Hey, we'll get through it.
Anyway, she pretty much immediately figured out a way to divorce him and get custody of their son, who then changed his name from Charles Luther to J. Charles Warner. And again, I wanted both of his sons independently of one another changed names to J, which is super weird.
Interesting.
No commentary in the news article on what precipitated that, or if they ever knew that or what. And then we have the last son, who we do have a picture of at the end there, who was Valentine Michael Manson. And he was born in 1968, so 8 years after the second Charles Manson Jr. And he was actually part of the cult. He was born into the cult. He was 14 months old when the murders happened. His mom was charged with murder, but was granted immunity because she testified against Charles Manson. But then she ended up going to prison anyway because she tried to help get Charles Manson out of jail. So he was raised by his grandparents and
in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Wow.
Eau Claire, Wisconsin, yeah. And then he said why they changed his name. I think they wanted to get rid of the Manson name because of school and to make me a little more normal. So I wasn't being pestered or bullied or that sort of thing, which didn't happen much. Which, yeah, solid idea. I would not want to send my kid to school with that name. Certainly in the news, it had probably gotten out, like, what the name of the baby was. Anyway, he said that he did not know or communicate with Charles Manson during his childhood and ignored all of Charles Manson's attempts to communicate with him, which is good. He did he reached out to his father via email one time while he was in the military. It said Manson replied with a postcard to Michael's home, encouraging his son to write back, but Michael never got around to it before Manson died in 2017, explaining days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, and I just never did it, and then it was too late. I think that's probably great.
That's probably better for him.
Yeah. So yeah, so he never even looked into what happened with his parents' crimes, but he does say he doesn't believe the helter-skelter theory. That he thinks that he was not an evil cartoon character that the media and courts and now the public have believed in as the scapegoat, which I kind of agree with him. It really bothers me when people try to make him out to be cool. That's why I couldn't watch that show with David Duchovny. What was it called? I forget. It had some like really oblique name, but it was about Charles Manson, and they made him out to be like this all-powerful supervillain. And this was even before the cult had even started at this point in the story. And it was just like, what are we fucking doing here? Like, so yeah, that's Charles Manson's 3 known sons. He may have more. Hopefully, if he does, they don't know.
It would be better if he didn't.
Yeah, like I said, the first one killed himself. So
yeah, that would be hard. I can't imagine having to deal with it. That would be difficult. So
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of difficult, we're
Are you
going to
ready
talk
for
this week.
trigger warnings?
Oh man, because we got some trigger warnings for this.
This is only the second time I've cried watching a documentary for Cult Bar.
I definitely cried too. There were tears. Like, my wife watched the last episode with me, and we were both like teary-eyed watching some of the stuff. And we'll talk about that. But we're talking about Devil in the Family: The Fall of Ruby Franke. So this is something that's actually fairly recent, happened in news. So like within the last 2 years is when everything kind of went down. So why don't you go on with trigger warning before we begin?
All right. Well, we have coercive control. We have religious and spiritual abuse. We have abuse of a therapeutic relationship. We have child abuse. We have exploitation of children as workers. We have, what else? Infidelity at an incredible and alarming rate, or like standard, I guess. And also wrapped up in the therapeutic abuse is a lot of sex shame and weird application of the term addiction, which I guess we'll talk about as well. So probably also some financial abuse in there as well, depending on how you want to define that, given that she was making all the money. So
yeah. Excuse me. So lots to take into account here. So if any of those things that you don't believe you can handle, please, as we always say, you don't have to watch. We'd rather you take care of your mental health over watching our show. So please do that if you need to. Okay, so basically Ruby Franke, if we're going to start from the beginning of her thing, is basically like in I believe it was 2015. She wanted to be this like mom, like this every American mom figure. So she decides to get on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about in this show before they get to this, but I don't think much of it is really germane to what we want to talk about. So she wants to be this like famous mom. So she goes on YouTube and she starts talking about parenting and all this stuff. And so with that, she's filming all the time, and the kids are young. Like, some of them are very young. What's interesting is that I think is a good thing is they blur out the four youngest kids' names who are not part of the documentary, and never blur out their faces and blur out their faces and make sure they never say their names on camera. The two oldest
about that's really, like, I guess, like a high five to the filmmakers on this one is that we only got the most cursory details of what those kids went through. Yes. We got enough for it to be really fucking bad and really uncomfortable and really upsetting, but they did not go into details. They didn't like show pictures of the wounds, anything like that. They really, I felt like they did well by the four youngest kids.
Yeah, I think so as well. We should also mention that they interview Kevin, Ruby Franke's husband, a bunch of neighbors, and the two oldest kids. So basically, you're getting real firsthand accounts of what's going on, which you and I both know. When you don't have that can get to unreliable narrator territory.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, I think everybody in this particular documentary is an unreliable narrator because of how siloed everyone was from each other by design. Mm-hmm. You don't really have a full picture of what everyone else is doing and going through if you're being like set in places with, metaphorical partitions between, but they can definitely talk about what they went through. And I think that is, I'm glad that the oldest kids were involved, because it would feel like they were being further exploited if they refused to be a part of it. And then this documentary is made anyway.
Yeah. So that's good for that, because like I said, we're getting real firsthand accounts of stuff that went on that they got to experience and see. Now, I know you had mentioned wanting to talk about the sort of idea of this was a cult within a cult. Yeah. You want to start there before we start digging in?
I think we should, because I think we were talking about before the show, we did that series of documentaries on Jonestown, and the first one we watched was about how, Jim Jones didn't really do it. It was these women. And when
which was the dumbest documentary I think we've watched.
Yeah. And you know anything about Jonestown, you're like, well, sure, that all makes sense if you forget everything else that we know about Jonestown, right? Yeah. And so when I was watching this, I felt like that was kind of happening with the Franke family, where a lot of things were being treated as though Ruby Franke woke up one day and believed all kinds of crazy things and did all kinds of crazy things, and nobody seemed to think it was crazy. So actually, aren't they all sort of guilty? And it's like, well, they were all Mormon, living in a Mormon neighborhood, living in a state with the highest population of Mormons. Maybe we should talk about what's normal to Mormons and not what's normal to your average person sitting at home watching a true crime documentary, because I'm both of those people. And it's a very different viewpoint. So one of the first things I wanted to say is the doomsday thing. And I think we talked about this a little bit in Sins of the Mother. Mm-hmm. The Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whatever they want to be called right now, is a doomsday cult. They are. The Latter-day and Latter-day Saints refers to the fact that they believe that the second coming is going to come at any moment. And they believe, like a lot of Christian religions, that is going to be apocalyptic. It's not going to be fun. So they do believe that. They tell their members to have 6 months food storage and water storage and any important medication storage as a commandment from the leader of the church. So we hit a point in the documentary where Ruby is stockpiling supplies, and they act as though that is evidence of her getting further involved in this thing with Jody Hildebrand. But what it would have looked like to her husband and everyone else is that she's finally getting around to something she was supposed to be doing anyway.
Okay.
So that was a big one for me. And that same thing with when they went to Jody's house and there's this bunker, right? She was a super wealthy woman who used to have a big family. It's a status symbol among Mormon people, especially in what ex-Mormons call mortar, which is, the Mormon quarter, Mordor. Anyway, the better your 6 months supply is, the more you have. If you were able to talk your doctor into giving you 6 years worth of a medication, etc., that's a status symbol among very true believer, hardcore Mormons. So that's the first thing. It's already a doomsday cult. They already tell people to stockpile food and water. They tell people the second coming could happen any day. They tell people that at any moment you could be required to drop absolutely everything and head to, I cannot believe I'm forgetting it, but the place in the Midwest that they think is the real Garden of Eden. That's a real thing. I'm not making it up. You can Google it. That's mainstream Mormon church. That's not an offshoot. That's not only the super weird ones. That is taught in Sunday school. It is taught in Bible study. It is spoken from the pulpit. It's real. The second thing is the roles in the family, because we'll get to why this is important, but it is. People believe that because the Mormon church and the Mormon culture is so patriarchal, that men have all the power. But the reason the Mormon church has been able to survive is because they give women a sense of power. The man is the head of the household and the woman is the neck, is what we hear a lot. So he's the head, but the woman tells him where to go. And she is the queen of the home. She rules that dominion. She says what happens, what doesn't happen, how the kids are raised, where they go to school. She is in charge of all of that. The husband is not really even supposed to have influence on it, realistically. And that's kind of how you keep women in the church, right? Because it doesn't feel like my husband has all the power if I run everything at home. Which, at home and church is most Mormon families' whole world by design. So she's running half of their shared life. And often, and this is more cultural than it is religious, but culture matters. me. My notes just died on me and started updating. When Mormon families experience divorce, which is more common now than it was when I was in, but it did happen, because the woman is the one that runs the household and she is the one that makes all the decisions and etc. There's never any question in anybody's mind that the husband is going to leave and the wife is going to take care of everything. Being divorced is massively shameful, and women take the brunt of that shame. When culturally, it is relatively expected that if a man's wife dies or he gets a divorce, that he's going to remarry pretty much instantly. And when you look at what divorce means for a Mormon person, it really depends on if you're a man or a woman. If you've been married in the temple, which I would guarantee you the Frankes were, considering their status in the church and everything else, you have to petition for a temple divorce, and your spouse has to grant it to you in order for it to happen. And there's all sorts of other worldly consequences to this in the afterlife, blah, blah, blah. But if you're a man, you can get remarried in the temple without a temple divorce. If you're a woman, you can't. So what often happens is that the man will leave and just not be involved with the kids. Even if he wants to be, it won't really happen. And I'm sure there's going to be like 100 people who come across this and say that's not how it happened in my house or whatever. And that's great, because that's how it should be. Both parents should be involved. But culturally, it's sort of expected that the man just moves on with his life. And if he doesn't, that he's the one that's being unreasonable. The other thing I was going to say, that although men are the spiritual head of the household, women are told to guard their husband's spirituality and protect him from making bad decisions. And of course, that's going to come into play in what we talk about as well. So you would say, oh, I'm the priest holder in the house and I'm in charge. But your wife would say, this thing you're doing, I really feel like it's not in the best interest of our family's spiritual health and you need to stop. And this goes all the way back to Joseph Smith, like the whole rules about coffee, tea, alcohol, tobacco. That came from Joseph Smith's wife. So this is not a cultural thing that happened over time. It's baked into the religion. So her having the kind of control that she had is not that surprising to me. Kevin's maybe a little bit weaker than the average Mormon guy, but not that much. I'm using that term. I know it's maybe offensive, but it's true.
In the context of which we're talking about, that would be how it would be perceived.
Yeah, he's just, this is not like Mormon men do get controlled by their wives in the home, and they get controlled by the church when they're not at home. It's not like they have so much more autonomy, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Mormon women get controlled everywhere except for the home. So it's a shitty trade-off. Everybody suffers, but that is the culture. Another thing I want to mention is that every person at the age of 18 gets what's called a patriarchal blessing. And if you go into like ex-Mormon communities and you talk about it, you'll find out that there's like a lot of things that just get repeated. Everybody kind of gets the same one, but occasionally they'll get a priesthood holder who's got a flair for the dramatic. And so when I'm watching this and they're talking about her kind of delusions of grandeur and how important she thought she was supposed to be and she's supposed to change the world, I really wanted to see what her patriarchal blessing said, because they will get weirdly specific. It'll be like, you will meet your husband in your second year of college and you'll have 5 kids and your eldest son will go on to be one of the leaders of the church. Like, it'll get into stuff like that. And some people do get really grandiose blessings that say that they are going to change the world, or they are going to be responsible for bringing spirituality to the masses. They're going to be responsible for bringing, thousands of people into the church. Like, this really happens. And if you're Mormon, you believe it. It's, it's a religious right. So you wouldn't, the only people who don't believe their patriarchal blessings are people who've already left the church. That's basically what I would say, right? And then last but not least, we're going to be talking about porn addiction a little bit. I want to preface this by saying I believe in process addictions. The DSM only has one process addiction listed, but if you can be addicted to one activity that floods your brain with dopamine, then you can be addicted to any activity that floods your brain with dopamine. And not to get like too personal, but I've seen in porn, it's pretty exciting. So I get it. Like you could get addicted to that the same way you could get addicted to adrenaline junkies or gambling or online shopping, video games, like these things that we know happen. Sure. But the way the Mormon Church defines porn addiction is super fucked up and weird. And basically it would be like if you watched porn and you enjoyed it, you're a porn addict. And you're going to be having to fight this addiction for the rest of your life. And then we also talk about an addiction to lust that comes up in this men's group that Jody Hildebrand leads. And one thing to understand about Mormons is a lot of Mormons get married and they don't have sex for days, weeks, or months after they get married because of the psychic damage that is done by being told that even thinking about sex is a sin akin to murder. But then when you get married, it's fine. And so you see how this, you can't just wake up one day and have a totally different attitude about something than you've had your entire life, right? It just doesn't work.
Pounded into your skull for that many years. Yeah.
Right. And at one point in this, we'll get to it, but Kevin says something about he didn't know how to have sex without lust to this group. And it's supposed to be really profound. And it's like, that's insane. Nobody knows how to have sex without lust. That's all the stuff that isn't lust that goes into sex is stuff that happens without sex. He, in this place, I don't know how much influence Jody Hildebrand had over it, but I know that the church did, is like, lusting after my wife is a bad thing. And it's like, well, it's bad if that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to be sexually attracted to your wife. It's encouraged, right? So a lot of Mormons struggle with that. A lot of Mormons have very sexually dysfunctional marriages. A lot of people leave the church and can't even imagine trying to date somebody who's never been a part of the church because their ideas about sex are so wrapped in shame. And I think it's important to understand that when we get into Kevin's side of the story, because there is so much that is being done over here that I think I can really see how it would absolutely fucking destroy a hardcore Mormon man, and that he would totally buy into the bullshit that he was being fed. So I think that's all the shit I wanted to cover.
Maybe we'll run into other things as we go along.
Yeah, it's just there's so much. I mean, we'll get into stuff that I think is kind of influenced by Mormon culture, but I think those are the big ones. It is a cult. I'm not saying that to be edgy. I'm not saying that because I think if I host a cult show, I should say I was in a cult. It's a cult. They control you in, the bite model, Steve Hassan's thing. Go look it up. It ticks all the boxes, and the attitudes about sex and power are nuts. And that was it. Perfection. That was the last thing I want to talk about, because we get to this point where they're like, oh, she was all about perfection and being perfect. And, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah. And all of the other blonde white women in Happy Valley were not interested in perfection.
Yeah, you just have to look at all their houses when they're being interviewed, and everything is spotless and everything looks really clean and nice, and everything's when they're showing pictures of the neighborhood, everything is. I said it in my notes. It looked like something. It looked like Stepford. That's what it. Everything was just flawless, and that seems
that is another part of Mormon culture. Mormon culture is very prosperity gospel, and it's very everything is perfect and everybody is happy. And if it isn't perfect and you're not happy, it is because something is wrong with you. Mm-hmm. There's no deviation really allowed. One of the things that started my journey away from the Mormon church was a girl I think I might have mentioned this on the show before. She went away to college and she bleached her hair. And you would have thought that she had a full nervous breakdown and robbed a fucking pharmacy, the way people talked about it. So there you have it. So Mormon culture really, as we get into the details of this, it plays such a massive fucking role in every aspect of this story. Up to and including, in my opinion, Ruby's escalation of abuse with Chad, because he was definitely not perfect.
Yeah. All right. So let's lay some of the characters out here. Yeah. Cheers to that. So let's lay out some of the characters. Ruby Franke obviously is the main person. She's in the title. Jody Hildebrand is the person who actually links up with her where things really kind of go southbound, more so than they already were. Kevin is Ruby Franke's husband. Chad is her oldest son, and Sherry is her oldest daughter. Those are the people that are directly with the family. Now there's a host of neighbors and things like that, which, we'll talk about the neighbors. We both have thoughts on those motherfuckers, but yeah. So like going back here, 2015, she starts a YouTube channel. She basically is just trying to show that she's a happy mom and she has all these kids and everything's great. And it's just this, like you said, this image of perfection, that everything is hunky-dory and just great. And so she keeps doing this, and it gets some popularity. And she changes their account to be called 8 Passengers, which they said had a significance to them. Is there a thing in Mormon theology like the 8 passengers, like the passengers? Is that something, or maybe I just was like, okay.
I didn't get it. I thought that like it's something to do with
maybe they're passengers on the planet they're supposed to visit when they all die. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That one was I didn't quite understand why it was significant. As like aside from, I guess you can say like we're all passengers on our spiritual journey or some weird shit. Like I don't know. I wish they would have explained that because it didn't make sense to me.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was some sort of like sort of niche thing in Mormon theology that was like a significant thing.
Utah.
Maybe a Utah thing. So the other thing that I forgot to mention is, yes, we have the people who are intimately involved with Kevin, Chad, and Sherry, but they also allowed like over 1,000 hours of unseen footage. So we get to see a lot of the background of shit where she's mad about how they're not doing stuff, or she's chastising kids for not being smiley enough or happy enough. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, existing.
Yeah, a kid, like a teenage kid being like, well, they're a teenage kid. What do you think they're going to do? Like, that's how I was a teenage kid and I was like that. So like, I could see how like, but anyway, initially, as it usually does, it starts out pretty great. The kids are having a great time because they're on camera and they're able to act a fool and be funny and all that stuff within reason. Yeah. It was really like Chad was even saying how he and Sherry were kind of like best friends because they were on camera a lot together, and they tended to be the ones that got the most views, right? So, so Ruby would film them a lot, and she would also just talk about. I didn't think the videos we saw in the documentary. I've never watched any of their videos like on YouTube, so I'm not unfamiliar with how they do. So I didn't hear her doing too much talking about the religious aspect of it. It just being, but it was more like just a vague, look how happy we are. We're such a great family kind of thing. So again, playing into your point of perfection. That's a great way to look at it. It's just, they were just really, she wanted to be super mom and seen as perfect, and everything was, all their kids were happy and it was a perfect life. I do find it interesting that, excuse me, early on, Kevin, she started featuring Kevin in the videos. And initially he said, I was very uncomfortable with that because he said, I was just a nerd. And so that kind of tried to put him in a different context. And once they got paid the first time, which was $85, that made him change to think that, oh, this is a good thing, which at $85 changed your mind. Like, wow, my guy.
Again, like I said, money means that you are faithful. It means that you're a good Mormon. So I hated it. $85 to sell your family out is like, ugh. But I guess he was already going to let her do it anyway. Oh, I can't hear you.
I muted myself because I had to cough. So you did say that, like in the house, the wife runs the show. So if she was doing that stuff in the house, that follows suit. That he'd be like, okay, well, she says we're doing it. I guess we're doing it. So,
like a lot of Mormon women who get into the MLMs and stuff, right? Like the husband's at work all day and she's going to do whatever to keep herself occupied. And if it makes money, great.
One thing I want to note here is they do a quick recount of Ruby and Kevin's meeting. And I made this, my wife made this joke where they met in like, what was it? August of 2000. And then by October of 2000, they were engaged. And and at the end of December, they were married. And Joe made the joke, Mormon and lesbian marriage timelines are the same.
It is though. I mean, maybe even faster because lesbians have sex before they move in together.
That's very true.
But yeah, well, and the whole thing about him finding her weird chart about all of her suitors in the closet and studying it so he could be there.
Yeah. So first of all, how did he get into her closet to see
fucking that? Right? I don't know.
I thought that would be like he shouldn't be anywhere near her room. Like I feel like is that verboten?
Did we know? Did they say if they were at college when they met?
I believe so, because he said 2000. I think they were in college. And I said, 5 other guys were courting her.
But it is courtship in the Mormon church. That's the
I
thing.
know.
You're not allowed to date, even go on a date until you're 16. And you're not allowed to go have a relationship until you're 18. And at that point, it is for the purpose of finding someone to get married to. And you're not really supposed to be alone with that person. So if they were at college, he might be in her room because you're allowed before a certain time of day or whatever to be in someone's room with the door open. But if you close the door, you can literally be expelled from BYU.
Yeah, BYU is one of the more stricter religious ones. Although what's funny is they were in the NCAA tournament for basketball, and I called them, oh great, soaking universities.
I gotta say, I'm gonna say this. I think that a lot of that is exaggerated, given how repressed and how desperate people are not for anybody to know that they even think about sex. I think a lot of that's exaggerated. I do think people do it.
Could be.
I think a lot is exaggerated.
But it was just my attempt at a bad joke. So
no, it's fine because I think it's hilarious. But then people are like, oh, they keep adding to it, and I'm like, well, yeah, you can literally be expelled for shutting your door. So I don't know.
All right. Like I said, we have. Also, you're right. Just now, I see all these neighbors' names in my notes, and you're right. They're all just everybody looks perfect. Everybody's just wearing very nice clothes. And they're all white. All white. I'm not saying there's no black people in the Mormon Church, but I can't imagine there's very many, especially considering the
Mormon Church has a little bit of a history with black people.
Yes, so they do.
There's not a lot of black people in the Mormon Church. Yeah.
Yeah. I do. One of the funnier things I found when the neighbors were there talking about how when Ruby and Kevin moved into their neighborhood, into Happy Valley, because they were not from there, not in that neighborhood, and they said they never asked permission to film, and Ruby would be walking with her kids and she'd be filming the whole time, and their houses would be in the background. They didn't like that shit. I thought that was funny.
I thought that was funny too. I was like, are you joking right now? It's a public street. It's not like she's filming in their yard.
It's not an Area 51.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see the chat. I need to pop off camera for just 1 second.
Go ahead.
So if you, I'll be listening, but I just need a second.
I'll be listening. All right. So another couple things here that, like I said, I have a billion notes. So what's interesting is now, she's in this neighborhood, and this is obviously a very affluent neighborhood. Lots of rich people, with these really fancy, expensive homes, which is another thing. How do Mormons make so much freaking money? They
have so many kids to feed.
I know. You just think about how are you doing that? I know how much I make, and I don't make a bad living, but holy crap! How do you? I don't know. I'm off track there, but that just always kind of struck me as they always I don't know if you ever see that show Big Love.
No,
Jill watched that a bit. Well, but that's like the polygamy aspect of Mormonism that they explored.
Right.
So the guys would have like they would have like 3 houses. I'm like, how the fuck are you owning 3 houses? Like, and then have like 6 kids at each house.
The Duggars lived like their house was nice. I'm like, I don't know how much money you have to make to feed and clothe that many people and still have a nice house.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it helped that they lived in the middle of fucking nowhere, but that is not what the neighborhood that the Frankies lived in looked like.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was one of those side tangents. I'm like, look at all these how do they make so much freaking money? What are they doing? Like,
probably things we wouldn't approve of if we knew.
Little only more. What's that?
And they're giving 10% of it away.
Yeah, maybe there's like a Mormon OnlyFans where they're like,
oh my god,
not actually doing any porn. It's more like just showing, oh, here's my ankle, little shoulder action.
You know what's fucking crazy though is that literally, so showing your shoulders if you're a woman is like you're gonna cause your brother to stumble, but now that the church is trying to mainstream like into the world, not just with themselves, if you live in a hot climate, you're allowed to have garments that let you show your shoulders.
Oh, so yeah, you want to show that they're with the times, I suppose.
When there's like women talking about like, I feel so uncomfortable. I'm wearing my sleeveless garments for the first time to church today. I'm showing my shoulders. Mm-hmm. So maybe there is a Mormon OnlyFans full of shoulders. Who knows?
Only shoulders.
Porn shoulders is a literal terminology. And yeah, showing your porn. I'm showing my big shoulders and my collarbones today.
Well, you are not in line with the Mormon dress code there, my friend. So
I normally am, so it's very odd.
Yeah, you very much always are like super chaste and are really covered up, from what I understand.
Everybody always says, Renee, you're one of the most modest people I've ever met.
Yeah, that's how I normally describe you to people. So. What's this Renee like? Oh, she's very modest.
Very modest.
Very quiet. Very submissive. Shy.
Yeah.
Hey, can we talk about the one dude that I don't know he was necessarily a neighbor. He must be a neighbor. It's the one that's like the Brannon, the guy who was a therapist.
Oh,
that guy
he worked for Jody. Well, worked is a stretch. I guess. Paid. Yeah, he was an associate therapist at Jody Hildebrand's therapy practice and was not getting paid, which is not normal because that's not an internship. It's when you're getting licensed, you have to have so many hours in practice before you can be licensed. So that's how you practice, because you can't practice without a license, right? So you are an associate, and then Jody would have been his supervisor, and then the hours rack up, and eventually he gets to be a real live therapist, but she wasn't paying him, which is not how it's supposed to work. Like so many things in your therapy practice, it's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, it was funny when they started to get him to ask about the things, and he was like, I have to word this very carefully. I'm like, I'm sure you do, because not only are you a therapist, you also are in a neighborhood where everybody kind of knows everything.
Yeah. Well, and
so
everybody in the Mormon church knows everybody in, any region because the way it's set up.
Yeah. He also what was up with his hair? I'm not one to criticize people normally with his hair, but that hair was something else.
I really want to know if he's still in the church or not. I think maybe he isn't. And if he isn't, I think that explains it.
Because it was it's permed, but it a really loose perm.
My thing is, so when you meet somebody who was really sheltered, and so they're trying to sow their oats, but they're super awkward about it because they have no idea how, right? I feel like that's how a lot of ex-Mormons are when they're trying to figure out how to dress like a normal person.
Because I can see that. Yeah.
There's a look, and everybody falls in line with that look. And then it's well, how do I differentiate myself? And I hate that people can look at me and tell that I'm Mormon. again, that was never a problem for me. But it is a common thing. And I think maybe it's just like, well, I'll grow a beard and I'll, do this thing with my hair. And then people won't know that I'm Mormon.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't scream Mormon to me, but like, again, what do I know? I'm not in Utah, so I just thought his hair was funny and interesting. So like, do your hair the whatever you want, but man, that was a choice.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, sometimes when you're trying to be individualistic for the first time, you're not always great at it, and that might explain what's happening with his hair. It might not. That might not be the reason, but
yeah, whatever. Anyway, so let's get back to Ruby Franke and all this a little bit.
So, sorry, I just noticed my one comment about Happy Valley before we move on. My note on it is, this neighborhood sounds tedious as hell.
Yeah, and I remember there was one line that one lady said, people don't really move out of it, they just sort of house hop. And I'm like, the fuck does that mean? They're like, hey, I'd like to sell my house. Do you want to buy it? And I'll buy yours. Like,
yeah, I know. I didn't understand that either.
It's a really weird comment. Maybe they just switch wives. Maybe the wives stay in the house and the husband just switch houses.
Just rotate. It's like the kinky Stepford Wives. What was that? Remember that the other Mormon influencer controversy was about the wife swapping. They made a Hulu documentary about that too.
I thought maybe you were talking about Jerry Falwell, but that's a whole different cult.
Yeah, he's a different,
different cult. So obviously Ruby's filming every freaking thing, and it was interesting. At one point, she tells the kids that they were getting to a point where they were tired of getting filmed, and Chad specifically and Sherry, and she said, well, we all filmed. This is how we make money. And if anybody who helps with the filming gets $10. And the $10 freaking dollars. And then Kevin said at their peak, they were making like $100,000 a week or $100,000 a month or something like that. I'm like, that's fucking insane. So, and you're paying them $10 and they're the one doing all the labor. Like, you're filming, but they're doing labor on it too. Like,
well, and they don't want to,
Yeah, but and then Chad also says, like, at that point he was like purposefully misreading lines or just being non-cooperative because he just didn't want to be doing it so much. He wanted to just go hang out with his friends. I'm like, he was like 12 or 13. I'm like, yeah, that's what 12 or 13-year-olds want to do. They want to go and do their own thing a bit, and that's part of like growing up. But this is where we go ahead. Sorry,
this is a weird take. I'm putting that out front because I don't think that any of the kids should have had to do this at all. But I do wonder how different things might have been if she let Chad and Sherry be normal teenagers and then put the focus on the younger ones.
Yeah. That would have been maybe, I don't know if that would have worked out any better, but maybe, but at the same time, like,
eventually it's the same problem, right? But like, yeah.
But, Chad saying he's kind of fucking videos up on purpose, and and then I think this is where Ruby starts doing a little bit more like on camera. I'm going to be the mom and show you that I can be strict because that's what I need to be to do this thing. I think that's where we start veering into that territory a little bit.
That's when that starts, because if you remember, Sherry says this was amazing because I know that she did it on purpose. She says in one of the videos, Ruby's talking about being strict or whatever. And Sherry says that Chad had to sleep on a beanbag in the basement. And Ruby's like, oh, I don't think our followers know about that. And then
Chad talked about it.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh, well, this is why. And let me frame it like it's not a big deal, which of course it's a big deal. Oh, that's what it was. It was like, when we take things away, we don't give them back until like they're earned back.
Yeah.
And then it's like, Chad had to sleep on a beanbag in the basement for a year.
Yeah, it was like 6 or 7 months, I think. But even so, that's nuts. And in a basement. It was in a basement.
One night is nuts. Like, I'm sorry. There's certain things. This is okay. This is the one where I'm like, this is one of those things that I absolutely consider abusive, but like, you know, there's levels, I guess, where it's like, I don't think people should take their kids' doors off. Like, I know people disagree with that. And those people are not beating their kids or starving them or any of the shit that Ruby Franke ended up doing. I just think, like, you know, I'm a parent. My job is to provide, you know, as much of the hierarchy of needs as I possibly can. And definitely having a bed and having some semblance of privacy is part of that. And it's part of how you learn how to be a person, right? So it bothered me a lot. I wasn't surprised at the backlash at all, but it was weird that after all of this, you see people saying like, well, that's proof that Kevin was just as abusive as she was because he was okay with that. And it's like, well, I disagree with taking your kid's bed away, but I don't think that that person needs to be like strung up.
Yeah.
Ruby Franke deserves to be strung up. Like there's levels here, you know? So.
Sure. Everything's a spectrum. Everything. Like think about anything as a spectrum. There's levels to it all, you know? And there's just with like there's certain abuse that's worse than others, but like it's still abuse. You can still fall in the same category, just whatever the level is. Like,
well, there's like I said, her kids could have went to therapy because they had a crappy mom. And then like, yeah, like she would take our bedroom away. But instead, they're going to therapy for way more serious shit. You know, like.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, that was Sherry. Sherry doing that, I think you're right. I think that was a sort of a genius move to kind of show that shit wasn't really as great. And she played into her mom's look how good I make sure that they earn their things back when I take them away. Like she said to Chad, has there ever been everything I'd taken away from you that I'd given back to you within 6 months? And that's where Sherry jumped in and said that. And Chad's like, oh yeah, I've been sleeping on a beanbag in a basement for 7 months. Like what the thing? And the thing is like there is. I feel like that there's a similarity in the Mormonism and in like evangelical Christianism that is a very real thing of like spare the rod, spoil the child kind of approach, where it's just like, yeah, I can be physically abusive to you because I'm doing it for your own good because God tells me to.
I think you're right, except that in evangelical circles, you would say that. Whereas in Mormon circles, you would never say that because your kids just are good. They just are.
Like they don't do that in evangelical church.
Yeah, when it's like, again, this focus on being the perfect Mormon family means that I am just such a good parent that my children are just good children. And whatever happens behind the scenes to make sure it looks that way to the outside world, God only fucking knows. But to the outside world, even amongst each other, it's like, yeah, no, like they're just good kids.
Yeah. Evangelicals do that to some degree. Now I'm taking this. I was not raised evangelical. My wife was. And so she would tell me stuff that would happen. So there's like a lot of, it's not nearly as much perfection in evangelical churches as with Mormonism, but it is definitely there to some degree. Yeah. And, you know, being strict was seen as being a good steward of your children kind of thing. So, you know, I don't know. That's like side tangent stuff again, but
yeah, it's like very, it's like a matter of degrees or it's like a matter of nuance, right? Because like, I just couldn't imagine people talking about the ways that they discipline their children unless their kids were already at a point of like wildly acting out where it couldn't be hidden.
Yeah.
So like, you have to be strict. There's not really any of that because, oh, I don't have to be strict. My kids just do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird. It is weird. It's a weird way to do things. So like, at any rate, so like you said, this is said on a video. They released a video and, you know, Kevin makes a point. This is kind of like the spark that, you know, blew up the powder keg or whatever the hell he said. And he said Ruby was not ready for backlash because she had kind of positioned herself as this perfect mother.
Yeah.
So like, So he said, Ruby was devastated. Ruby was America's mom. We saw this as a good religious family being attacked by cancel culture, and cancel culture is winning. That was his quote.
My notes are cancel culture.
Yeah, I just said get bent after that. Get the fuck bent. Cancel culture is not a thing.
There are no liberals in the fucking Mormon church. They don't exist. What is considered liberal in the Mormon church is like, I think that maybe sometimes women could wear pants to church. So imagine what that feedback loop is like. If that's like, because what people I think don't always realize, they know Mormon people, and those people are always really nice, and those people maybe even invite them over for barbecues and whatever, right? They're not your friends. They are doing that in order to convert you. They go to their church meetings and they're told not to associate with anybody who isn't Mormon except to convert them. So they may be very friendly to you. They may speak to you like a friend, but they do not give a shit what you think.
Mm-hmm.
They are in their bubble. You're worldly. You are already bad. You're bad. You're a bad influence. The things you believe are bad, but maybe you could change. So yeah. I care about what my people in my neighborhood, who I go to church with, who are the people my kids go to school with, care. And I'm in this bubble, and especially in Utah. Like, I was in Central California. There were a lot of Mormons. There weren't majority Mormons, right? These towns they're talking about, they are living in, it's like 95% or more Mormon. So all of the conservative talking points, all the Fox News bullshit, like, it does not matter how nice you are, it's getting in. It's the water that you're swimming in. You know, like, fish don't know they're in water, and Mormons in Utah don't know that they're in Mormon. So I was not surprised at all to hear, like, oh, it's the woke mind virus. I mean, I know he said cancel culture.
Oh, but you do.
If it happened 5 years later, it would be the woke mind virus.
Well, she did say that later in one of her things where she was like,
yeah,
if you have a woke child, you need to beat that out of them or something to that effect. Like,
yeah. It was your woke child is a walking zombie.
Yes. How many times have you heard the zombie thing in relation to people not in a particular cult or religion? That is always like a standby for them.
The only time I ever hear anybody talk about it, like it's a real thing, would be like, oh, that medication made me feel like I was a zombie. I had to change medication.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
Not like you are a zombie and I have to get away from you or purify you with fire or whatever. Like,
yeah,
no, it's not normal.
No, it isn't, and it just kind of strikes me as weird that that's like sort of like we did that even when we talked about Sins of the Mother. Like, she talked about them being like zombies and stuff like that, and I'm like, what is with you folks and zombies? Like,
I didn't stay in the church long enough to sit in the Relief Society meetings where all the moms go after church on Sunday. Maybe they were talking about zombies in there all the time. I don't know, because remember, she was Mormon too.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a term that I see a lot in those sort of things where they just basically make it sound like you're brain dead is what they're trying to say.
Well, I think more soulless is what they're going for, I think.
Oh, yeah. That's probably better. But like soulless and brain dead, maybe both. Why not both? So what's interesting is there's a quote here, and this we'll get into Kevin a little bit because we have a lot to talk about with him. So Kevin said that there was a part where they asked him if a lot of the criticism that Ruby was getting from this was valid, and he said a lot of it was valid. Now, the thing about Kevin that we get throughout this three show series is there's a lot of him being like, yeah, I did that. Like, not walking away from the responsibility of it. So, which I think for me is different. Like, we see so many people just like, no, it was this and it wasn't my fault. And like, he's like, no, I did that and I fucked it up.
Yeah, well, we talk about this a lot, don't we? Where it's like there's this line where you can be a victim You could be manipulated. You could make decisions based on those manipulations. But at the end of the day, you still did it.
Yep.
Whatever you did still had the results that it had. And I think it is very rare to see somebody take ownership like that. And he does talk about how he was influenced, but when he's talking about it, it doesn't really sound like he is
making excuses.
Yeah, it sounds like he's like, this is what happened factually for, I guess, context, but I did it. And I think that that's actually kind of powerful. I don't like him. I think I don't have a lot of nice things to say about him, but that was refreshing.
Me either. But seeing just that sort of facet was really, really interesting to see, because it's not something we see much in the shows and movies we cover about cults. There's not a lot of, I'm very accountable for this particular thing. There's one thing he says later where he didn't want to see the photos of what happened to his youngest kids. And my wife's like, yeah, because you don't want to know how much you fucked up. Like, yeah, you don't. And there's another point where he said something like, I didn't want to think about that because I would just go, like, I would go nuts, like knowing the badness that happened because of his participation or, willful compliance, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to say. I think that if the documentary had been made a couple years later, we'd have a different Kevin. We'd have different, everybody would be maybe a little different, but I think he would be significantly different.
In what way? Well, how would you see it?
Well, at the end, they ask him if he loves her, and he says yes. And the reason is not because of what she did, but he can't separate her from all the memories that they share together, all that. I don't think that's going to be true in a couple of years.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that he really hasn't had time to deconstruct everything that happened. I don't think that he's really come to terms with it. I also think that there's some Mormon influence there, because it says they got divorced. It doesn't say that he asked for a temple divorce. Maybe he did, but I think with the amount of Mormons and ex-Mormons following this story, if that happened, it would have made the news. Like, I'm privy to conversations about this with people who are following it really closely, even though I'm not. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he asked for a temple divorce. And in the Mormon religion, when you die, if you're married in the temple, you're reunited, blah, 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 blah. And everything that's wrong with you isn't wrong with you anymore. So whatever thing that made her do these things would be gone, and she would just be the person that he married. So, and I think that that probably plays a role in what he said, but I also think what I hear from people a lot who've been in really traumatic, fucked up relationships is kind of what he said, which is like, well, once you love somebody, you always love them. And it's like, well, no,
I agree. And
healthy people's opinions and feelings for other people change based on how those people behave. And if your opinions and feelings about somebody don't change based on how they behave, you need to get healthy. And I just don't think he's had time. I think he could go to intensive therapy every single day from the day she got arrested to the moment he was sitting in that chair, and it wouldn't be enough time to recover, to make sense of it, to be like objective. I think in many ways he's very stuck in his shame that he let it happen, and he's got to work through that before he can have a clear view, because he's like, the same thing that we're saying is kind of refreshing to see, I think also keeps him from fully seeing how bad she really is. Because right now he's just in like, I fucking did this. I fucked up. It's like, well, so did she, and a lot worse. So there's a lot of I just think that in more time, we would see more healing. And I think that the relationship that he has with the kids could possibly change. I don't know that it would, but I think that it could, for the same reasons.
I think one that I don't think would change is Sherry. I think
think that it's possible. I do, because the issue there is that she felt abandoned, but so did Chad, and he just processed it differently. And they were very much in the soup where she wasn't. And I think that with time, she will have a clearer view of that, and they will have a clearer view of what was going on with her. I don't think it's ever going to be like buddy. Well, they're not going to have a close relationship, but I think it will probably, with time, be different, even if it's not even a relationship. It's just how they view each other.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Sherry called them Ruby and Kevin and not mom and dad, like during the whole time she talked during that, was like a very clear sign to me that like she's axed them from being mom and dad in her brain. And maybe that's a defense mechanism. You know what I mean? It could be just, I need to do this because this is just how I can process it. I don't know.
Well, at the time that her mother was disowning her, her father was as well. And I don't think to her that there's any difference in why. But I think with time and better understanding, there's a possibility of seeing that difference and having some empathy. But here's the issue. You should never have to have that kind of empathy for a parent. And that's why I don't think, like, I'm not saying they're ever going to be like a happy, smiling family. But I think that there's a good chance that with time and perspective, it's like, okay, the same thing was happening to him, but he was just dealing with it in the stupidest fucking way possible.
Yeah.
I have a stupid parent, or well, I don't anymore. He died, but I had a stupid parent, and I get it. Like, you don't come back from that all the way, but
yeah, it's just it's. I don't know. It's just like when we were talking just about the idea of Kevin as he was liable, like what's his participation? I mean, he's complicit. There's no doubt on that at all. To me, he's complicit in all of it, even if he wasn't there for the last year, which is, something we're going to have to talk about. But like, I think he's entirely complicit. Now he does very clearly. He knows that he's got responsibility in this. And the thing is, I know as a dad, I would feel the exact same way. If something went on with my kids and I didn't do something that I should have, I would feel guilty as fuck all the time.
Complicity is really difficult. It's a difficult word for me because of, and we haven't even gotten here yet, but I mean, this is where we get here. Back up a little bit. So Chad's acting out and he gets kicked out of school. And the idea is we're going to get him a therapist, which I got to say, this is super fucking unusual. Like, Mormons don't use therapists. They use their bishop, who has no training, by the way. So this was actually a pretty progressive thing for them to do, which tells me she is probably pretty hardcore Mormon. Even though they don't say that, I don't know. Anyway, they get this therapist. And I think another reason why it's important to understand the Mormon culture, they don't use therapists. They don't really believe in therapy. If they do go to therapy, they tend to go to a Mormon therapist. And so maybe they don't know all of the stuff that the average person seeking therapy, or maybe not even the average person, maybe the average person doesn't know this either. People I know about how a therapist is and is not supposed to behave. I think that's important here. The reason, like, I've been in so many stupid fucking ethics classes, right? Because I'm training to do this, but whatever. The reason why we have all of these crazy tight rules on what a therapist is allowed to do and not allowed to do, and who they're allowed to work with and who they're not allowed to work with, is because you can absolutely have undue influence on a person as their therapist. And it is really, really important that you do everything in your power not to cross that line into undue influence, where it's pretty clear that Jody Brand fully intended to have undue influence. It was, and she was treating the son, hanging out with the mom, and treating the father in group therapy for a problem he didn't think he had until he had been going for a while, which is super fucking weird, right? Like, you don't show, like, if you say, I want you to go to this men's group, and you think it's going to be Bible study, or it's going to be about like more positive masculinity or whatever. And they're like, you're an addict. And you're like, to what? Something.
Well, at the beginning, when Kevin was going in, she kind of stood him up as the model of what a man should be. Like, remember, that was how she.
Super intentional, though.
Oh, sure, because she wanted the influence of Ruby Franke and Kevin because they had lots of
But also,
followers. So,
but I think it was long-term intentional. I think that the point was to build him up, make him feel good, make him feel important. And then when she started beating him down, it felt real because she didn't come in hating me. She didn't come in saying there was something wrong with me. She said I was awesome, but now she's seeing these problems with me. And I guarantee you that she talked about what was happening with the son, with Kevin, with Chad, with Kevin, like, oh, well, your son's doing this and your son's doing that. And what are you doing? And how well did he get that from you? Like, these are things that can happen when you have somebody who's involved in all of these aspects of somebody's life, and that's why it's not allowed. And so I think it's important to remember that she did not just have influence over Ruby. She had influence over Ruby, she had influence over Chad, she had influence over Kevin, which meant that not only could she get them all on the same page, but she could play them against each other as well. And she was being treated as the expert who was going to save their family. They were putting a fair amount of trust in her, which in a ethical, good, healthy therapeutic relationship, you should trust your therapist. In one,
you should.
Power, and she doesn't even have a license, it turns out, and she thinks everyone's addicted to everything and she hates men.
Yeah, there's that part of it too.
Yeah, it's super fucking weird. And I see how it happens. This is stuff that, people don't think it's going to happen to them. They think if they go to therapy and their therapist starts trying to influence them in a way that doesn't align with their values, that they're going to go, you know what, go fuck yourself. But that's not reality. That's why therapists have a million fucking rules to follow. Because in reality, you don't go to therapy unless you think there's something wrong with you. So I think that it's hard to gauge that with the information that we have, because we don't really know how bad it was. Even Chad doesn't really talk about what they talked about in his therapy sessions.
No, a little bit, but not much. Very vague.
Yeah.
Very vague.
And we don't really know what's going on in the men's groups, aside from the fact that they're being shamed for using porn and experiencing lust, which, again, in the Mormon church, experiencing lust is literally like somebody good looking walks by and you're like, oh, they're hot. That's lust. That's fucking terrible. You're sinning.
Yeah.
So these people are already primed to feel so much shame. They're already primed to feel like they're doing so wrong, that they're putting their family at risk and all this other shit. And then you have someone coming in and being like, you are right. Yeah. And in fact, it's worse than you think it is. So I think it is important to remember that context, because it seems like there was a very intentional breaking down of Kevin by Jody. And then, big surprise, why did she want to do that? Why wasn't she doing it to the other men in the men's group?
But I think she was, just not to the extent that you
not right, not at the same level.
But she would shame the shit out of the guys in there about, I watched porn, I stumbled. I said, well, what are you going to do? Is this going to be the way you're going to live your life? Or are you going to not respect your wife and your family? And like, she would just go off on them. And as far as I know from a group therapy session, that is not the approach. You don't.
No, literally, I am taking that training right now. I have homework due on it. And the appropriate way to deal with someone in addiction, even if they are at a point where they don't really feel like they have one yet, is what's called motivational interviewing. And you're trying to get them to see where their values are, and if the life they're leading matches up to their values in a way that is driven by them, not you. Because you can't, as a therapist or a counselor, tell somebody what's wrong with them. That's not actually how it works. That's not what a diagnosis is, right? A diagnosis is, this is how we're going to bill your insurance company based on what you have told me is wrong. Not, I'm telling you what's wrong with you. And so it's like, there's nothing real about the way she was conducting group therapy. It was massively manipulative, massively unethical, and actually counterproductive. If there were men in that group that were genuinely struggling with porn addiction or any other kind of addiction, she was not helping them, because that's not how you help people with addiction. It's just not. Like, scientific, like researched, evidence-based. It has to come from the person, and they have to feel empowered. You can't overcome something if you feel like you're not able to overcome it, it turns out.
Yeah. Well, so we got Jody in the mix now a little bit. So just a little bit of a rewind on this is that now we're seeing, like, we get to hear a bit about some of the like physical abuse starting, like, because Ruby does this point where like, pardon me, Kevin says something, and this was really in where, like, sort of solidifies for me a bit, was where he said he didn't know the extent of what was going on in the background. I knew that how it was modeled for her. Love is obedience, but the moment you disobey me, you're going to fear me, is how he said Ruby approached that sort of thing with her kids. And then he said that sometimes off camera, like, Ruby would lose it and whip him on, like, his ass with a belt, like bare ass. And then Sherry said this thing, and this, like, really kind of fucked me up, was, she said, I did always feel bad when he got in trouble. He'd get a bloody nose and I'd bring him toilet paper because I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, why did he have a bloody nose? That was never expect. Did his mom punch him? Like, what the fuck happened there? Like,
I do think that it's good that the documentary did not get into heavy details of abuse, because I do feel that that's exploitative.
Sure.
But, well, and here's the other thing, is that Chad was part of the documentary. And so it is possible that he was just like, look, I don't want to
rehash all that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is yeah, like, you don't get a bloody nose from much. Yeah. You know, like, the vast majority of things in life do not give you a bloody nose. And if it's directly related to an interaction with another person, then it's usually getting hit in the fucking face.
Yeah. And there was also one thing where she said he did get beat one time really bad, and I helped him clean blood off the walls. Walls. Again, I'm glad they didn't go into super detail on this. Like you said, that's exploitative and don't really need to see that. But, like, that left a million questions in the air for me. Yeah. Like what happened? I don't need to know the dirty details, but, like, what if you're helping someone clean blood off the walls? That's really serious, like super serious.
Well, and we know that Ruby has some sense of hi Lola, of what's appropriate and what's not, like, to the rest of the world, because she's not doing it on YouTube, right? She's not saying this is the belt I used to whip my kid's ass. And I do wonder, and again, we don't have enough detail to even speculate on this. I just wonder, did the worst of it happen while Kevin was at work? While he was out of
no doubt.
And so it's like, oh, I saw Ruby lose her shit and smack him across the face, is very different than I saw Ruby lose her shit and blood spatter was on the walls, right?
Yeah.
So it's again, there's not enough information. It's possible that he knew the extent, and that makes him a total piece of shit. It's possible that he really didn't, and he felt powerless because, again, the woman is the head of the household at home, and you just don't fucking get divorced when you're Mormon. And if you do, you hear about people. Well, you hear about people who stay in the relationship with the person who's abusing the kids because they are afraid that that person will then have unsupervised custody some or all of the time to abuse the fuck out of them. Yeah. If I'm not there, who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, there's a protective element to that for sure.
And it happens. Like, you want to say that's an unreasonable belief. You just prove to the court that they beat your kid, but that's not how real life works. Now, think about what I was saying earlier in the show about how Mormon culture deals with divorce where there's children. And it would not just be that he wasn't there all the time. It would be that he was expected to never be there. It would be, especially as the kids were older, that he's just not around. And so if I can't prove that my kid is being beaten that badly and I don't even know how bad it is, maybe I choose to stay because at least I have some influence, or I think I can calm her down, or I can, whatever. Oh, can't hit him in the face or whatever. Like, it's so hard to know. And I think in part that is because he's taking so much responsibility that he's not explaining himself, and in the same way that is good, because he just needs to own it. It's hard for us because we're like, well, what the fuck was going on?
Yeah, it's just kind of a mess. But now, as far as like the progression of this, Jodie's like in it full time. Like now she's in all of it. And it's just interesting because they say, what's that?
How she starts her journey into their home.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is like they basically make it sound like when she started getting involved, like their relationship got better, they were happier. They kind of make it seem like this. Now, I think, and this is reason number 4 gazillion 22 why I think COVID fucked so many people up. COVID enters the middle of this. And that's when Jodie really starts asserting herself in all this. Like really asserting herself, like just because COVID messed a lot of people up. I'm thoroughly convinced that messed a lot of people up mentally. And, why wouldn't it? You were isolated and you couldn't do things, and like people were dying.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a crappy relationship and you remove some of the stress from it, at first it's going to feel like it's getting better. And getting up and getting ready for work in the morning is stressful. Coming home into the flow of everything that's been going on, and dinner needs to be cooked and everybody is stressful. The kids are having problems at school, but they're not in school anymore. So now that, like all these things were happening, daily stresses everybody deals with, stresses that were specific to them. And COVID comes along and it's like, you just get to spend all day together cooking and laughing and having fun. And you worry about what school says about your son, and you don't have to worry about the shift when you come home from work, which I'm sure in that household was way more intense than your average household.
Mm-hmm.
So of course it got better. And he was being coached to do whatever the fuck Ruby wanted him to by his therapist. So that might have been why it got so much better too. Because if you're not pissing me off, then I'm fantastic to be around. Ask anyone.
Yeah. So like I said, I feel like COVID was like a trigger for different things, for a lot of different things that caused a lot of issues. Like I know like one of my kids had a real struggle with online school, and another one but it was like a technical thing. And then another kid struggled because they're very, very extroverted and need conversations with people in person. So that really struggled for him. And 2 of our other kids are like, like everybody's different,
like, in our house, we had one essential worker, which it wasn't essential at all, but whatever. And then, a kid who couldn't handle online school. He was too young. Like little kids can't. I'm sorry.
That's not going to work. Yeah.
So, I went from like a really stressful and toxic job to I quit, and then the state shut down. And then I was a full-time homeschooling mom having to build a curriculum, not using the computer because the computer wasn't working. So I get it, man. It was rough. Yeah. It was like things were nuts for a lot of people, and people really, I feel like almost everybody went one of 2 ways, and a lot of people did both things, where it's like you either like lost it, or you went really introspective and made a lot of changes in your life. And some people did like a real muddled mixture of both for a while over the 2 years. So if you already have like a toxic situation in the home, it's not going to get better. It's
not if your proximity is increasing as well. So it's not going to get better. So, we're getting into still we're rolling with all the backlash, and Ruby is like kind of really doubling down on her videos, being like, I'm being this, and this is how it is. And she changes 8 passengers to moms of truth, which, okay. Like,
well, here's the thing that's super funny too, is that all her neighbors were talking shit about her filming, but then like it comes out that they were all watching her channel.
Yeah.
And a couple were like, I never really watched the videos. And then they would say something about something they saw in the videos. It's like,
you never really watched them, eh?
But yeah, that she went and invited all of her neighbors, including the men, into the Moms of Truth Facebook group, which I thought was interesting. Not Parents of Truth, Moms of Truth, but let's get the dads in here. I don't know. Branding issues, I guess.
Yeah. Whatever. So, but this also exacerbates your whole thing there. You're talking about the end times. They thought this was like, all right, the end times are happening. Everything's happening. You have COVID. You have all these people dying. You have, it comes into the later, a little bit later, George Floyd protests, and like everything just seems like it's rolling in a weird direction. So I feel like this is part of where they're like, okay, well, let's, like you said, they start stockpiling shit because they're like, okay, this is the end times. Here we go.
Yeah, and I feel like the average Mormon probably lives with like a fair amount of denial or dissonance about the fact that it's supposed to be like any second now. Like, I don't think that most Mormons like wake up every day thinking like this is going to be it. But they are bound to think harder about it if that's what they're being told in church every Sunday, and then shit starts getting weird, right? And like I said, I think that probably what happened in the eyes of people watching, whether this is what happened with Ruby or not, is that they were like, well, shit got real, and so she figured out that she really does need that six month supply. She really does need to expand it to a year or 6 years or however long she can, because look at how bad things are getting. And she's probably wishing that she listened to the prophet earlier. I don't think anybody looked at that and thought, oh, something's wrong with Ruby. She thinks that it's the end of the world, because nobody in their community would have thought that.
Yeah. I do think it was one of the weirder things Kevin said was like, he's in the middle of it and he's like, and this is happening and it's exciting. What the fuck do you think COVID was exciting? Like, what?
Because you have to remember that people who think that Christ is coming back to cause this horrible apocalypse that's going to make everything terrible think that it's going to benefit them when that happens.
Yeah, because there was a point where they asked, they said something about he said everyone's going to burn, but we felt like we were on the right side of things, and every freaking religion does this. We're on the right side of it, like, okay, you all can't be right. So,
I don't think every religion quite does it the way the Mormons do, or like hardcore evangelicals do, though. Like, that's a whole,
yeah, it's a whole different ball of wax.
But there's like, again, there's a spectrum, there's nuance here. Like, but it is that thing of like, Mormons believe, like a lot of evangelicals do, that when Christ comes, all the evil in the world is going to go away and all of them are going to get rewarded. So that would be exciting if you believe that, because when you think about who's evil, your church maybe tells you it's everyone, but in your mind, you're not thinking that it's everyone. You're thinking about, like, I don't know. I was going to say Trump, but actually, no, not these particular people wouldn't think Trump, but
fair.
They're thinking like, oh, like people who kill babies. It's like, well, yeah, but your church actually says it's everybody who doesn't go to your church.
I don't know. It just, what's funny is after that comment about we thought we were on the right side, I just wrote eye roll. So it's my feelings on that.
Yeah.
So, but now again,
in my notes too, but it's later.
Yeah. But so now Jody and Ruby are, like I said, full-time hoarding food, like doing the whole thing. All right, we're gearing up for the end times. But now we get into this thing where, like in 2021, where Jody proclaims to them that she's seeing like black spirits around her all the time.
Here's my eye roll emoji. She's not seeing them all the time. She's waking up in the middle of the night and they're standing around her bed. And we have a word for that. It's called sleep paralysis. It is
and sleep paralysis demons.
Psychological condition. I have it really bad. So like, I guess the stats are something like 50% of people will never have it. And of the 50% of people who do, only like 75% of them or something will only have it once in their entire lives. I've had it consistently since I was like 14.
So you're one of the lucky ones. Good to know.
Yeah. Oh no, it's great.
Sounds
I've gotten to a point where I have like a little bit of control over it and it's not as bad anymore, but that took a really long time. But the first time it happens to you, you don't know, like people don't just talk about it. I think maybe now the internet maybe be like, oh, fuck, I think I had sleep paralysis last night. But for the most part, the first time it happens to you, you're just like, what the fuck? Like, do I believe in ghosts now? Like, what were those aliens? In my case, it definitely wasn't aliens. It's not how it works for me, but whatever. It's terrifying when you don't know what it is. But
Yeah,
she's
I imagine it is.
Therapist. She didn't think to Google it.
Kind of. She's kind of a therapist.
She used to be a fucking therapist.
Maybe that's a better way to phrase it.
Well, because the next note after my sleep paralysis eye roll is therapists don't have patience. This is my biggest red flag. I love that show Shrinking, but they all refer to their clients as patients. It's like you're not a doctor. Even if you are a doctor because you have a PhD or a PsyD, you're not their doctor. That's not how this works. You don't have patience. Therapists do not have patience. Psychiatrists have patience. They're medical doctors. So everything that she says or does is like, wow, you fucking what? You're the worst ex-therapist ever.
I couldn't agree more that she's the worst ex-therapist ever. but I guess so Kevin and Ruby just decide, well, we believe you. Why wouldn't we? Ruby would at this point, Jody was sort of a demigod in their world, right? So
though that this is some more Mormon bullshit though, because if you believe, and these are real things that people really believe, that somebody is sick, you can fucking put a little bit of olive oil on their head and have a bunch of guys stand with their hands on their head and say a prayer, and they will get better. No matter how many fucking times you do that and they don't get better, you believe that. When they eventually get better a week later, you're like, yeah, it's because we did the thing. Like, for real, if you really believe that, and you really believe that there's a guy who lives in Salt Lake City and talks to God himself every fucking day, and all of this other shit, that Satan is literally out to get you because he's jealous of your life, why wouldn't you believe in demons? And
yeah.
Why? It makes less sense to not believe it.
True. Now, the thing that I want to understand is they decide they're going to go to her house and get her. And that house is 4 hours away.
Yes.
What the fuck? Why is that? Why is she the therapist for the Happy Valley people if she's 4 hours?
Well, because everybody in St. George probably knows she doesn't have a license.
She's like, fuck that lady. I'm not going there.
They're like, no, we're the reason she doesn't have a license. We reported her to the health department.
But they also show up and they realize oh, she has a mansion. She has two floors underground that are just here's I'm stockpiling food. And it's like a concrete basement bunker thing. And just like you said, that's your status symbol. She had the status symbol of that. And it was Chad made the point that she gave them a tour and it took 2 hours to tour the whole place.
Yeah. And when he said, and this is the thing that it drives me nuts about the lack of context, because if you don't know that stockpiling food is literally mandated by the Mormon Church, and that people with a lot of money, they're look at all of the stuff I have, then it seems super fucking weird that Chad was well, it looked like she was stockpiling for a whole family and not just, it was weird that she was stockpiling, right? Because to him, it wasn't weird that she was stockpiling. It was weird that she was one person and she had enough food for 6 people.
Well, she didn't have any, she was divorced and didn't have any of her kids. So,
Can't imagine.
Yeah. So basically, they go to her house and whatever they do, whatever. I could care less about the house, but then I guess Ruby just suggests, hey, why don't you come stay with us so we can help you with this paralysis demon nonsense?
Because now she's my son's therapist, my husband's group therapist, my business partner and confidant, and
my roommate.
Well, before we get there, and now I am treating her spiritual issue.
Yeah.
It's what the it's so crazy. It's just, to me, it's God, we talk about dual relationships. is when you're a therapist to somebody that you have another relationship with, right?
Right.
You're not supposed to. So like, I could not ever be your therapist, no matter what my qualifications were. I could never be your therapist. And you just look at this web of all these things that she's doing within this family and the family. And it's like, there's not even a fucking word for this. This is like a constellation of relationships with each person. It's so mind-bogglingly unethical, but it's like you don't even have to know about the ethics of therapy to be like, this seems like a bad idea for you giving spiritual treatment to your therapist.
Yeah, it seemed like a bad idea to me.
Like, what? So your therapist is supposed to be the one who talks you through the things that are happening in your spiritual life so that you can figure out, oh, you know what? I think maybe that was a nightmare and I'm not actually being haunted by demons. That's how it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to be doing that for your therapist.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts. But so this is now, so Jody moves in. They make Sherry move out of her room so Jody can have her own room. Sherry's like, I don't care. I'm going to school soon. Whatever.
Right.
Fine. I'll deal with it for a couple of weeks. So, but this is with Jody in the house. Now she has the ability to really exert herself in this whole thing. Very soon after this, they do the videos of her doing like the weird voices and like, she's mine, I own her. And I'm like, what the fuck is like?
It's so fucking fake, Doug. Like that's it was like, she's not schizophrenic. She's not delusional. She's faking it. And it's like, God, I really just wish that fucking Mormons in Utah were like forced to have a Rumspringa and like go out in the real world. So that when someone was really fucking, because here's the other thing. You don't want to watch R-rated movies if you're Mormon.
Yeah.
They're not even like, oh, like, did you get that from The Exorcist?
And it was bad. It was bad acting. Bad acting. Like her pounding her chest and doing all this. I'm like, okay.
She's mine. It's like, come on.
But with this, she's in there. So basically, like they're trying to help her, and like Kevin talks about, like putting his hand on her and saying Jesus' name in as many different variations as he could think of, and they're doing this for weeks, and nothing works. Nothing works, like you said. Where they put the olive oil and nothing's working. I'm like, yeah, because that shit doesn't work. But also,
it's not real. Even if he really had the power to heal somebody with a spiritual malignancy of some kind, they would have to actually have the spiritual malignancy. When we got there, I was ready to just fucking pack it in. I didn't want to watch anymore. I was like, this is so, like, I feel insulted.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine living in that house and just being like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing now.
Well, because our guy Kevin can't exorcise some fake demons out of her skull for some reason, because they're fake. Ruby says that she needs to go and be with Jody overnight because that's when the demons are the worst. So she sleeps in the same bed with Jody.
I have to tell you this. My note at that moment was, so they're gay? And then we get more details. I was like, not doing a very good job hiding it, actually.
Yeah. Like when at one point Sherry, when she's home from college, goes into the room and finds like massage oils and like candles and all this stuff in the room. And she's like, well, what do you think? She's like, I think they were lovers. Sherry was just so mad at her.
It was so funny because she did hedge it too. She's like, well, I can't say for sure. But then when they talked to Kevin about it, he was like, so like
he was thick-headed.
Such a okay, he said he was a nerd. He's such a fucking nerd. He's so fucking sheltered that he's like, it couldn't have been that. Oh, babe, it could. It was, Like any reasonable person, at the very least, it's getting real fucking close to fucking if it's not fucking. Period. Like there's no. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I agree, and I don't think there's any doubt they were being intimate. But of course, now this is going to escalate to where poor Kevin gets extra. Basically, told Jody tells Ruby that she does a whole thing with the men's group where separation is a good thing, which is like an odd thing to suggest for a like you don't suggest that unless someone's in imminent danger. Like I don't think you can do it.
Not allowed to.
Even if they're in imminent danger.
Literally not allowed to.
Okay.
You could say, I'm worried about you. Do you have a plan? You're not allowed to tell clients what to do ever. Ever. But especially, you're not allowed to tell them to end relationships. You are not allowed to tell them to separate. Like, if you're a therapist and you have a client who comes in every single week and talks about what a raging fucking narcissistic cunt their mom is, you can't say, I think you should cut off contact with your mom. You have to be like, well, what could you do to make this easier on you? Or what do you think a solution to this is? Or, you have to let people make their own fucking decisions. It's really not allowed. Even when sometimes it would probably be a lot simpler if it was. The reason it's not is because of people like Jody Hildebrand. So yeah, no, you're not. Even in situations where people are dealing with like severe marital problems where separation could be considered like a therapeutic modality, where like you live separately and you do certain work apart and together, whatever, the therapist is not allowed to tell you to do it.
Interesting.
They can facilitate you choose to do it, but they're not allowed to tell you to do it.
And yet another reason why Jody Hildebrand is a piece of shit, but reason number 10,000. But so she basically tells Ruby this. Ruby goes to fucking Kevin and just says, "You need to leave. Not just you, Chad. You need to leave too.
Not together though.
Not together. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to talk to Sherry, who's at college. You're just supposed to be alone, isolated, and wait until I summon you for anything."
Well, but it's important to remember that she said that she felt that their marriage was in imminent danger and that this was going to help. And then he was being fed this separation is a good thing in his friends group.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, this is why you're not supposed to fucking do this shit, because now it's coming from two different places and it sounds like it makes sense. And again, the most terrifying thing that could happen to a Mormon person, male or female, is for their spouse to divorce them.
Yeah.
And she's saying, you do this or we get a divorce. In a normal situation where, you're not dealing with something that actually requires an ultimatum, like, you stop drinking or we get a divorce, you stop beating the kids or we get a divorce, things, there are times where it's appropriate, right? 99 times out of 100, it's not appropriate. 99 times out of 100, it's extremely emotionally abusive to give somebody like, you do this or we get a divorce.
What's funny is they also asked Chad, like, did you think that was okay? He goes, yeah, I thought I was ruining the family. Like,
well, yeah, they were telling him it was his fault specifically that Jody was having these attacks.
Yeah, and 17-year-old fucking Chad is like, got to find a place to live and do all that stuff, and just like, Jesus mighty. So,
and still have therapy with Jody every week for like 2 hours, which is not normal either.
No,
they didn't say that.
No, that's not normal, is what I was agreeing with you on. Like, I think it was like they said, every Thursday at 3 p.m. for 2 hours. It's like, why are you even talking to that woman? But like,
but again,
so she can control him.
They didn't have a normal relationship because he was talking about how he trusted her and he loved her and he wanted to make her proud. That's not how you're supposed to feel about your therapist.
Nope.
Ever. And it is the therapist's job to make sure that doesn't happen. Definitely not a 17-year-old's. always the therapist. Like, it's so insane watching this and being like, do we need to add like a lot of classes to high school curriculum about how the world works and what's okay and what's not okay, so that if a kid is in this fucked up situation where everything is upside down, at the very least somewhere in his life, someone has been like, therapists are not allowed to live at your house, fuck your mom, give therapy to your dad, and make you think that like they're as important as your mom. They're not allowed to do those things.
Yep. So now the only people living in the house are Ruby, Jody, and the 4 youngest kids.
Yeah.
So that's not a great recipe.
And the thing that's really sad about this, and this is where I say, like, obviously Sherry felt abandoned by her dad. She reached out to him and she said she watched him react with a heart emoji and then take it away and block him.
Yeah.
Because he really believed that if he talked to her, Ruby would leave him. And in his mind at the time, that would have been the worst thing that could happen. Because obviously, you know, if you had hindsight, we know what the worst thing that could happen was. And it damn near.
Well, and he said
days or weeks away from those kids being dead.
Yeah, and he said he placed his marriage over his kids. Like, he definitely said that about, I realized I had basically placed my marriage above the needs of my kids. And that's,
I think that's common in Mormon culture too, but maybe not as written in stone as the other things that I've said.
I mean, we're coming into the home stretch on this, and you know, we haven't really stuck to timeline much because we had so much else to talk about, which is fine. I love the conversation we're having so far, but there's some fucked up things, like a lot of fucked up things, but there's one thing where they realize, like, the neighbors start realizing that Kevin isn't around, and they see Ruby out one time and they ask him where Kevin is, and she's like, separation is a good thing for everybody. Like, every marriage should have a separation, I think I'm like, no, not every marriage should. Like, what the fuck is this?
And when she's like, it could be, I can't remember what the exact quote, but it was something really weird. Like, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. It's like, no, that's not normal, man. Like,
no, it's not.
If you're ever in a situation where separation is necessary and the hope is to not be separated forever, maybe we'll be separated for a week and maybe it'll be 20 years. Like, that's not how anything works.
Not how this works. But now we're going to get into
no contact with her, not just with the kids, her.
Yeah. With her, not with the older kids, not with the younger kids, just nothing. He basically said he became a hermit because he was just trying to, like, not do anything wrong. So, yeah. But now we get the opportunity to talk shit about the neighbors.
Oh, yes. I fucking hated these people. Well, like you said, when they're like, we shouldn't even ask permission to film outside. And it's like, well, it's because nobody has to.
Yeah. When you're in a public street, you don't have to.
My neighborhood is one of those neighborhoods where, like, if you park in front of somebody's house, they get, like, really, like, about it. And it's like, it's the fucking street, dude. It's not your driveway.
Yeah.
Calm down. That's the vibe I got, except for, like, but also they're rich, snobby Mormons on top of that.
So add that to the mix because that's fun. But, you know, we had these people being just like, oh, well, I was really worried because the video is getting progressively worse that she was releasing. I'm like, yeah, maybe, just throwing it out there, maybe you should call the police, especially when you notice she's gone and the kids are all in the house by themselves. Like, we don't know how old these kids were. They never mentioned it because they were trying to keep their identity anonymous and all this stuff. But several of them were young, under 10.
Yeah.
Like, so, like,
one that got asked for help was described as being 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 of them. And I think the others were all younger than him. I'm not sure, though.
Yeah, but the idea that, like, oh, well, you know, and please go on your thing about the neighbors themselves and the neighborhood and all that shit, because that was
okay. It made me so fucking angry because in addition to the fact, I mean, she says things in the videos like, I love these principals more than I love my child. She is talking about abuse in these videos. Now it's not like some parents are stricter than others. It's abuse. Like, it's there. But they're saying she's gone for days, leaving the kids alone, and she can see them looking out the window, faces pressed against the glass, looking sad, looking whatever. It does not fucking matter if there was like a house full of food. Those kids cannot take care. Like, they were not old enough. None of them were old enough to be in charge of 3 other kids. They couldn't take care of themselves. It did not appear that anybody knew the comings and goings of Ruby, so she could be gone for a day. She'd be gone for a week. They said this. They didn't call the police. They didn't call for wellness checks. They didn't call CPS. They didn't even fucking tell Sherry until way down the fucking line, which as soon as she told, what did she fucking do? She called the cops, because no shit.
Yeah.
But when the cops got there, the kids were not in the window and they didn't answer the door and they had no record of anything. And they're like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Well, have you seen them with bruises? Have you seen? No. You can't fucking expect them to do anything based on showing up and no one being home.
Yeah.
Because for all you fucking knew, the kids were with Ruby wherever Ruby was. But if you call every fucking time, if you say, my neighbor has 4 kids, I have not seen her car in a week, but I have seen her kids in the windows every day, I need a wellness check, they will fucking come. And even if nobody answers the door, it goes on a record. And then eventually, when they're trying to prove a fucking case of neglect, they're like, well, there's 50 fucking phone calls from the neighbors that say that these kids were left alone for days at a time. There's 50 fucking things that say the kids were never outside, whatever. There was nothing because they didn't tell anybody. And it is that because it's Happy Valley. It's our perfect little neighborhood. I'm not going to call the police and upset the apple cart. I'm not going to upset anybody. I don't want the neighbors to see the police. I don't want to have to talk to the police. Again, why the fuck was it Sherry, who didn't even live in the same state, which again, they asked her, have you been in contact with your mom? No, I'm not in contact with my family. That discredits her. Because how could she know what's going on if she doesn't talk to her siblings and she doesn't talk to her mother?
Yeah.
So then when the cops do show up, everyone's like, oh, we're going door to door to find witnesses. It's like, it's too fucking late. It's too late. And then when they said CPS closed the case, they didn't fucking call back.
Yeah.
You're allowed to keep calling. Because if they stack more evidence up, they will open another fucking case. That's how it works.
Like even the person that said to Sherry, like, I believe there's something going on here, but I can't just do something off of belief.
Yes,
Like it just, yeah. Well, the cop was saying that. It wasn't like, saying.
But I'm saying like your neighbors can't, because the thing is it's not like my job to solve the fucking mystery of what's going on next door, but I can call the people whose job it is. And I can call every time something is wrong. And these people like what we were supposed to do. Finally, someone called. And we tried really hard after someone else did something, but it wasn't enough. It's like, yeah.
And then the one lady said she called, and then she was like, I should have lied that I saw bruises on them. Like, like a little late now, but like.
This is the thing. She didn't even have to lie, because neglect will get your kids taken away too. And that's what they all knew was happening. And it's like, yeah, you have to set it like there's a reason why they tell you to document everything, to report everything, because these cases are built on evidence, we can't investigate based on being home.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the laws are there, because, in California, there's no lower limit to how old your child has to be left home alone. But if something goes wrong, they will investigate you and see, like, what was your judgment here?
Yeah.
So, like, if you leave your 2-year-old home alone and something happens, you're probably going to go to fucking jail. But if you leave your 16-year-old home alone and something happens, they're going to look at what
the
factors,
circumstances.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, and I think that's a stupid law, but it is what it is. I don't know what the law is in Utah, but again, if there's a pattern of people calling the police, there's a pattern of wellness checks, there's a pattern of concern, they have something to go for. Whereas showing up for a wellness check and nobody answers the door, wellness check is called in by somebody who doesn't have contact with the family at all. What were they supposed to fucking do? Then, oh, well, they said they were closing the case. So it's like,
we tried.
You fucking call every time those kids are left home alone after that, because now they will see, oh, well, we already had a fucking call that said this was going on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, again, we're escalating because this is what happens. At the end of it, we start escalating to all these different things. So, there's a lot of different shit that happens. Judge. Also, I noticed one thing where Sherry called the Springfield police, and the police come to Ruby's house, but no one answers, and a judge will not sign a search warrant.
Based on what?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like, but they made it sound like there was enough evidence he could, but it made it sound like he was just being like, no, I'm not doing
that was misrepresented. I don't think that was a fair way to report it. Like, I think what they wanted us to take from that is that law enforcement let the kids down, but I don't think that's what happened at all.
I agree 100%.
I don't think that the cops should be allowed to just fucking break your door down because someone who hasn't talked to you in a year called them and said something's wrong. That's pretty fucked up. Like, I think that they should have to have evidence to have a search warrant. And, in a case of a wellness check where they believe that somebody is actually in danger, they don't need a search warrant.
Yeah.
Simply that Sherry calling from another state and saying plainly she doesn't have contact with her family at all, but the neighbors said, that's nothing. That's nothing. They went out, they did the wellness check, nobody was home as far as they knew. What happened after that should have been the neighbors got a light under their ass, a fire under their ass to pay attention and make reports, because the whole fucking problem is that they had nothing to go on.
Right.
And you can't be like, oh, this video is on YouTube, because they're not going to look at that shit either. Like, that's just not how the real world works.
Mm-hmm. Well, so now we're at the point where the hero of the story is really this kid. This young boy just escapes out of a window somehow. How, I don't know, because it looked like he was in the bunker part of it. But anyway, he gets out and he goes to a neighbor, and he goes to a bunch of neighbors trying to ring doorbells, trying to get somebody to answer the door. And the guy that finally answers like the Ring camera, he's like, yes. Like, what kind of response was that?
Well,
like, here. They're out in the middle of the desert.
Interaction, but I have to say, how the fuck, what's the right way to react? One, I don't know that like through the Ring camera you could really tell what condition the kid was in.
True.
I don't think you could really tell until you open the door. But two, like, you just sit at home. They're in St. George now. They're not in the Happy Valley neighborhood. And it looked like
two of the kids are in St. George. Two are still in Happy Valley. But
the Jody's house wasn't like in a neighborhood with houses next door to each other. It was like everybody had property. Yeah. So, you're just sitting at home and some like kid you don't know rings the doorbell. It's like, fuck, I wasn't expecting, like, this is the year 2022 when this happened, 2023?
Yeah, 2022, I think.
Nobody comes over to your house without telling you they're coming over to your house, True. So my doorbell rings, I'm like offended. Like, what the fuck? Who do you think you are? And so I get that. But it was clear when he opened the door and he saw like how serious it was that he didn't know what to do, because what the fuck? What? I had a kid show up to my house once who was nonverbal and not like abused, just like it was a kid that got out in the early morning. Oh, okay. And I was just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like,
that's fair.
Like, I don't know what it's supposed to. So I like, walked him around. I was like, is that your house? Is that your house? And then we got kind of far away and I was like, okay, what now? I don't really want to take a strange child into my house, but
But he did have him sit on the porch. He said, take a seat outside. So that was good.
Yeah, but I mean that like in my case that wasn't, I didn't have a seat outside. But I called the sheriff and sat and waited and was like, I don't know, the kid's hungry. Should I feed him? Like, I don't know. Does he have allergy? I don't know. And so I kind of get that was a weird situation where what this guy had was a horrifying and weird situation. And so as weird as he was acting, I'm like, I don't have any idea what I would do. And I think it becomes clear that it's like there's like he gets that it's an emergency and he goes into emergency mode, but then when he has to describe what's going on, he starts crying. And that is when I fell apart, because it's just like, how bad does it have to be?
Yeah. Yeah, there's they do that. So the guy actually does call the police. It's great. An ambulance comes, and then one officer hears about it on like the radio and comes and takes pictures of him and they show like kind of the pictures and just he's so fucking skinny. You don't see his face, of course, but he just is skin and freaking bones. And he says his sister is in the other house, and he mentioned that the house is Jody Hildebrandt's. So I will give the cops kudos, and I do not give cops kudos very often because I have very strong opinions on police, but they keep their body cameras on for this, which is good. But they go to
would have had a story to she would have, yeah.
Yeah. So they go to Jody's house, they knock on the door, and the guys are like movement, and like the one guy's got his gun because he doesn't know what the fuck this lady's gonna have. If this kid was abused and he escaped, like what the fuck are you walking into? Yeah. So, and she opens the door and she's like on the phone, and he's like, Jody, yes, we need to come in. You can't come into my house.
He's like, oh yes, we can.
Yes, we can. And she's like, do you have a warrant? And they're like, no. But in this case where you think children I don't know what the laws are there either. If there's people in imminent danger there.
So yeah, so this is like constitutional. It's not down to state law. You do not have to have a warrant for a wellness check. You do not have to have a warrant. For a wellness check, you can be like, no, don't come into my house, but they could say, we need everyone in the house to come out. But in this, if you have reason to believe people are in danger, you can go in without a warrant, period. And so in this case, they had the kid the son was probable cause. He said, I was there, I escaped, my sister's in there. You don't need to go through the DA and get a warrant and all of that when there is probable cause ever, but especially probable cause with imminent danger. They were correct 100% when they're like, not in this case, we don't.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we were talking about where he kind of broke down, I broke down a little with the son talking about, just starting crying when he says, my sister's in there. And he's like, when's the last time you saw her? I haven't seen her in a month, but I've heard her. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, like the mind fuckery that would be is to know your sister, who's I think younger than the boy is.
Yeah.
And he's got to be like, she's in there. We need to, like, he wants to help. And just like, that just like, I'm a little on the verge now, just thinking about.
Yeah, for real though, because it was like, yeah, it is. And then, when you say, but I've heard her, like, we know that doesn't mean like heard her running around and laughing. Like it's, no. Yeah.
So the cops go in and they eventually find her, and she is in a room. Again, she's blurred, but you can see she has no hair in her head. She's in a room full of mirrors, which is something my wife noticed, which I didn't.
Oh, I didn't notice that either.
So there's a reason for that. Yeah. So they were doing that for a purpose. And she is sitting there and she is just like shaking and not talking for a bit. And then the one officer decides to sit with her. And the officer says about how you try to make things not personal, but my God, I was like really struggling not to tear up. So he just sat with her.
They should have saying like, I'm just gonna stay here. And I think that was a good move because she's probably fucking terrified. Like no other adult in her life has done right by her. Why would this stranger she doesn't know do right by her?
Also, I'm sure that they were telling her, like, if the cops come, that's the problem. Like, they're coming here to destroy things. That probably, because that follows kind of the pattern of cults. But then they find a giant safe in the lowest level, like a big floor safe thing.
Such a weird fucking setup that lady had. I don't. Yeah.
And they ask her, "Do you know the code to the safe?" She's like, "No, I don't know it.
I don't even know what's in there. I've never used it before." And the code is what, 1, 2, 3, 4?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
all I can think of is freaking Spaceballs, where he's like trying to open the thing. The combination is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Mel Brooks' character is like, that's a combination of my luggage." Dumbest quote. But the guy does it. He opens it, and they find like it's basically a bathroom. They have handcuffs, like freaking rope to tie people up, duct tape. They have like
chili sauce
to put in wounds, and like
old bandages. Yeah, it was real fucking. That's the thing too, where it's like, we did not see a lot of their injuries, but you see that room and it's like, what the fuck? Like the level of cruelty is so fucking unimaginable. The other thing, I know, like, I have mixed feelings about like judging Kevin for saying he doesn't want to see the pictures, because yeah, it's probably selfish, but also, what does it do? Like, he did not immediately get custody of the children after this happened. Hopefully they were starting to heal by the time he did. It's like, what is it? Why do you need to see your children and think of them that way if you didn't have to? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making my point at all with what I'm trying to communicate, because it's really weird, but it's like, I'm sure it's more than enough to just know that it happened, I guess is what I would say. Like, it seems very, I don't need to see the pictures to feel horror over it. And I don't need to see the pictures to feel disgusted.
Yeah. I think, but he also mentioned that it was like he was just still in the mindset of protecting her. Like, he didn't want to see it, because then I think it would have made it real for him. So it's a little bit of that too.
Well, yeah. And I think I forgot. Yeah, you're correct. I forgot that was the first thing when they were like, dude, do you think we're lying to you? Do you want to see? You're right. But I think too, it's like, everybody likes to believe that in this whole, like, we believe victims thing, that no matter who the person being accused was, that you would believe that they were capable of it because someone said they did it. Like, we like to think that that's who we are. That is super not realistic, right? Like, you wouldn't be in any kind of relationship with somebody who you thought was capable of doing that.
For sure.
So when it is being told to you, there is a part of you that is got to be clinging to the reality and understand, because to admit that it's even possible that this person did it, the world as you know it is now upside down. Mm-hmm. Everything that you believe is upside down. And I think, to your point, that he was in denial. It's like, as soon as he got home to the family home and saw that they were packing, and the neighbor said they were moving to St. George, he immediately was like, it was all a lie. It was all bullshit. Yeah. So to me, that is somebody who spent the last year arguing with themselves every fucking day, trying to convince themselves they were doing the right thing, trying to convince themselves that they were not powerless in the situation, trying to convince themselves that their wife was the person they thought they were. And then this one day comes along and is like, hey, guess what? You just wasted a fucking year. You made the biggest mistake of your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also a part of this where when he goes to the police station, all right, so we have to talk about that a bit because there's this part where he goes to the police station and basically Ruby tells him, calls him, and his like light of hope, this is what I've been waiting for. It's this chance to like, and she tells him he needs to go pick up his kids to redeem himself. Like even in the middle of all this, she's still telling him he needs to redeem himself. So also like before that, we know Jody got arrested because of all this. And while he's going to pick up the kids, or trying to, Ruby just shows up at the Jody's house with all the cops there and just pulls in. And like, if you, oh, I see cops, I'm just going to pull in. Like,
I think that she was so completely divorced from reality by that point. Like, she really thought that he would be on her side even when he knew what had happened. Mm-hmm. And I don't think she thought that, like, I think I fucking put money that she thought that she was going to say, like, oh, no. Like, I'm the mom and I said it was okay for my kids to be here. I really do. She was really far gone, and I'm not making excuses for her. She put a lot of effort into getting there, but she did. She put a lot of effort into it. She convinced herself that she was doing the right thing, and that other people should do what she was doing. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, you know, when she called Kevin, she said, I have some explaining to do. Your children are fucking possessed by demons. Just said that. No, but like the fact that that's not when everything broke open for him is a little surprising, because who the fuck says that? Like, I'm sure that he lies awake at night on a regular basis thinking,
why didn't,
and I still thought everything was going to be okay. What the fuck? Because that is, I mean, if someone said that to me in any kind of seriousness, my head would explode. That's fucking crazy.
I agree. But those, as we've talked about many times, people are in the cult and they're so far deep in it, sometimes like logic just kind of flies away because they're just in the middle of it so hard.
She wanted to believe it. And I think that she had the feedback loop with Jody. And like we've seen in these, again, in the Sins of Our Mother, and it's, again, they're Mormon, divorce is really bad. It's like, we'll just get everything that is standing between us having what we want out of the way. But the way we do that is to convince ourselves that the people standing in our way, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
So we lock the kids away in another room and ignore them because they're demons.
Right. Well, what's interesting is, remember in Sins of the Mother, she got divorced, like she was married like 5 times. Like that's a whole different point.
Right.
But like, what the fuck is that?
Chad was, yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing is, when Ruby gets arrested, like her face and her, like, or when she gets interviewed by the cops the first time, and just all the weird blinking she was doing.
Yeah. Well, and her posture was so weird.
Yeah, it's just like just really intentional blinking she was doing, which was really weird. And she says nothing when you're asking questions, and until she goes,
love to know if they drug tested her.
I didn't think of that.
Because it's almost like, you know, the intentional blinking is like, well, I know that I'm not going to, and they're going to think it's weird if I don't. So then I have to. And then, of course, that's even weirder. You know, it's just like, I don't think that she was schizophrenic. I don't think that she really, like, I don't think she was hearing voices. I don't think she had like a psychiatric issue that convinced her that the children were possessed. I think she convinced herself over time by getting sucked deeper and deeper into this like offshoot of the religion that she and Jody were creating.
Mm.
And
yeah,
remember,
I feel like they're
always started this like, oh, possession is a super real thing. And
yeah. The only thing Ruby says in the interview is, I'll wait until I have a lawyer, which, you know, hey, if you're talking, to be fair, if you're talking to cops anytime, that should be the only sentence you say to cops. Cops are not your friends. They're not. But in this case, she did that. And then what's funny is Jody also tried to pull that, but also tried to manipulate the cops, like right to the,
Right.
like very obvious
lawyer, but I will say all of this. Like,
I'm a therapist. I'm usually on your side. Like, oh yeah, that's
that was
exactly how
the weirdest thing. Like, I'm gonna convince you that I'm asking for a lawyer because I know it is the right thing to do, but we're on the same side here. It's like,
we're not so
house.
different, you and I. It's very
Yeah, the kids were in your house. And you were the only one home. Like, there's no like, oh, I didn't know that they were there. Like, what the fuck?
That's so weird. Like, just be quiet. But nope. Well, that's how she's always operated. She's always been able to kind of blab her way around things. So I guess she just thought she could do that with police.
Ruby, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have expected that from her, especially.
No, I would have expected her to be very loud about what she was doing, but yeah, no.
Yeah, like, or just like, you can't arrest me, but something. But yeah, there was a spark of intelligence left in whatever rot she invited into her brain, and I really think that that's what we're talking about, right? Like, she needed to believe that she was doing something bigger than just being a mom. And it turned into this, and she justified every single thing, right? Yeah. Like, it went off the rails when she started having to justify to other people, not when she had to justify it to herself. When she only had to justify it to herself, it was just like, this is how I run my house. Yep. When she had to justify it to other people, that is where it started to grow into something. And I do think that it was intentional, but I think, like, if you really want to believe something and you've got somebody on your side who's willing to play along, you can convince yourself. And I think that's what happened. Yeah, it's like, God, I wish I did believe in hell, but unfortunately I don't. So, whatever happens to her is what's going to happen to her. But I don't think that I don't know how to say this. I don't think it's psychiatric. I think it's just, she's a bad person.
Yeah. I agree on that. I do. I have a couple of loose ends we can wrap up, but do Mormons believe in hell?
Kind of. It's weird.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So the belief is, here we go, because let's do it, because actually this is fucking weird and interesting. The belief is that there is a pre-existence and we were all there.
Okay.
And God was like, okay, because the Mormons don't believe in the Trinity. They believe that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are three different
separate entities.
So they believe that God was like, I need somebody to go down there and fulfill my plan of salvation. And Satan was like, pick me. I'm going to go do it. And they're going to be so grateful. They're going to worship me. And he's like, fuck you, you shameless bastard. It's going to be Jesus, who is so humble, which is fucking hilarious when you think about how it worked out. Like, everybody worships Jesus now. Like, what? Anyway, so as a result of this, Satan was like, fuck you, we're going to war. And a third of the souls in the pre-existence sided with Satan, and 2/3 sided with God and Jesus. And there was a war in heaven, and the devil and his people lost, and they were cast down to hell. So everybody who's going to go to hell is in hell. However, they're all super fucking pissed that they didn't get to have a corporeal body and do all the shit we get to do, which, again, I make it make sense with theology. It doesn't, because this life is only supposed to matter like this much, but whatever. Okay. They're super fucking pissed about it. They're super fucking jealous. So they come, and especially Satan comes and tries to tempt you into doing shitty things. Okay. But to what end? Because
no more souls are going to hell. So
well, that's because there's outer darkness.
Outer darkness.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like where Cthulhu lives. Like,
that's where you go if you're particularly fucking horrible, and or you have the opportunity to receive Jesus and you reject. That's where I'm going. because I am an apostate. Because I joined the church, I believed in it, I thought better of it, I rejected it, and now I talk shit about the church. There's no way I'm going to outer darkness, according to Mormon belief.
I can go to outer darkness with you. We'll hang out.
Well, supposedly, this is the thing, right? Supposedly, the big bad thing about outer darkness is that it is life without the presence of God. And it's like, I'm already here, man.
Yeah,
it's fine. But
will there be sandwiches?
Right. The flip side of it is that you can like fill in whatever fears you have about a negative existence in the afterlife into this place, because we don't really, it's just outer darkness. What is the place that is full of people who've rejected God? So yeah, like everybody else would call it hell. Anyone would call it hell. They'd be like, okay, so you're not with the devil himself, but you're in hell. Like, but the Mormons don't, because the weird story.
Fun. All right. Well, that was something I didn't know, so thank you for that.
You're like, oh, and it makes perfect sense and no questions.
All right, so to end this on as far as how they talk about the thing, we have both Ruby and Jody plead guilty to take plea bargains, and they get 30 years each.
Well, and Ruby is just so instantly aware of how wrong everything she did was. Really weird.
Yeah, and even her daughter Sherry was like, I've seen crocodile tears from her before. I don't believe that. And also said she'll never talk.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
Like, no, it didn't. But Sherry said she'll never talk to her again, which I think, yeah, you shouldn't. Fuck that. But so here's where we talked about Kevin saying he still loves her, but so they do the ending where they talk about what these like Chad and Kevin and Sherry are doing. Kevin is filed for divorce. That was just it. They just said Kevin filed for divorce.
No, I was like, dude, what?
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a logical thing to do. Good for you.
I mean, I'm glad, but that's
it. And they say Sherry is campaigning against family blogging, which, hey, good for her. That's a good thing to do. But Chad is a social media influencer, and I feel like your mom did that. Maybe not the way to go, but
here's the thing, though. Okay, he didn't graduate high school. He's super fucked in the head. There's no way he's not. Again, there's not.
Absolutely.
In terms of recovering from what happened to him, like no time has passed. It's seconds on that clock.
Yeah.
And he has to feed himself and he has to pay his rent. I kind of get it. It's like there's nobody there to tell him how to pick up and move on. And if there were, he probably wouldn't believe them given all of that. You know, the last person who was trying to tell him how to live his life was a fucking crazy cult leader who helped his mom fucking torture his siblings and kicked him out of the house. You know, it's like he has nothing. No education, no family support, nothing. And so you look at kids who have way more of a head start and they think being an influencer is the way to go. He is somebody who has nothing but saw being an influencer make $100,000 a month. So I kind of get it. I hate it, but I don't think it's a mark against him, like who he is at his core. I think it's a mark against what has happened in his life. And
that's fair.
Hopefully it leads him to a place where he has time to reflect and he gets a good therapist with a real license.
And not a Mormon therapist, maybe.
Whatever the fuck. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I get it. He was put out on his ass when he was 17 years old. And for another, year or two, he was still under the influence of Jody.
Yeah.
He needs to have like a life outside of this fucking insanity. I think probably before, I mean, could you even imagine going to therapy after that?
A therapist would be like, oh shit, I'm earning my keep with this one. Holy shit.
But I mean, just like as Chad being like, yeah, sure. I'm going to go talk to a therapist about what this therapist did to me and my family.
Yeah.
So Yeah,
it'd be hard to find one you trust,
Do not fucking like it for him, but I think I get it. I don't know, like, what the fuck else is this kid gonna like set his sights on? It's like, I want you to go to community college and transfer to a university and get like have a real life and get a real job and get lots of therapy, but chances of that happening right now are probably pretty fucking slim. So I guess I'm just gonna try empathy.
Yeah. He also could be doing like that stuff for like as advocacy for
That's true.
people who are in distress. So it could be doing that. I don't know.
I fought the urge to look it up because I felt gross about looking it up, even though I was curious. So yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to either. So anyway, that was Devil in the Family, A Fall of Ruby Franke. That was a lot. I mean, we've had some really serious ones. This one, I do think they did an excellent job of demonstrating the abuse without being grotesque about it. So I thought they did a very good job of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so next month, here we go. Let's talk about the thing we're doing next month, which is The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin. First of all, that hair is going to be awesome to talk about.
I want to point out that is an actual picture. That is not embellished at all.
Yeah. Well, they pixelated it a little bit, but that is actually how she.
Yeah, as she got weirder, her hair got bigger. It was fascinating. So I don't think I've actually seen the whole series. I've seen most of it. This one is nuts. And I will say in advance, a month in advance, this one is probably absolutely going to trigger some people because it is about weight loss, anorexia. There is weird anti-Semitic stuff in it. There's child abuse. It's a really fucking weird one. It's basically a cult built around anorexia. Christianity and anorexia.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So
she's weird as fuck, and good news, she's dead. She died in a plane crash. Happened after this.
Really?
Yeah. That's how, like, I guess the documentary was being made or had already been made, and so some people knew who she was. I didn't. I had like missed the headline on this. I didn't have HBO at the time or something.
Me either.
And the plane crash happened, and my friend was like, Renee, Gwen Shamblin died in a plane crash. And I was like, who's that? And that's where it all began for me. It's going to be a tough one, but it is also really over the top sensationalist weird shit also. So it's going to be maybe a little fun for parts of it. But yeah, if you have weight stuff, I would say maybe don't watch that documentary.
Yeah, I believe, I can't remember. I want to say that was on either Max or Hulu. I can't remember which. Think of Max.
It's on Max, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that is on I believe, May 7th, if I'm correct. Let me look. Yes, May 7th. So we'll talk about that next month. So Renee, as always, been fun. Maybe is a word maybe not great.
It's been real and it's been fun, but has it been real fun?
I mean, we tend to at least have some giggles here and there, so I'm thankful for that. So
you did hit a spoonful of sugar, as Mary Poppins once said.
Fair point. All right. All right, folks, just remember this was pre-recorded, and we'll talk to you next month. Take care.
You can file your complaints up your butt.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.